Okay, so welcome to the Network Service Mesh Working Group meeting. We hold this meeting at 8 a.m. Pacific every Tuesday, and we also have a PR reviews weekly half an hour before this call at 7:30 a.m. Pacific every Tuesday as well. We also participate in a number of other events, including the CNCF Cloud Native Network Function Working Group, which occurs every Monday at 1600 UTC, and the CNCF Tag Network, which occurs every first and third Thursday of every month at 9 a.m. Pacific. There are links on the agenda. We have a few upcoming events. The next ones are KubeCon EU. The schedule is already posted. We have Cloud Native Telco Day, which is going to be co-located at KubeCon EU. There is a lightning talk on network service mesh being done by Ericsson. So thank you very much. We also have Open Source Summit itself, which is coming up in June 21 to 24th. And finally, KubeCon North America, which the CFPs are currently open. So think about what you would like to have presented at KubeCon. With that, we have social media. So we have Twitter, where we have posted 10 things. We have 6 followers and are following 17 additional people. And we also post information on LinkedIn as well, so you can follow there if you choose to do so. A couple things on the agenda today. Let's start with NSM version 1.3. So we currently have a release candidate, and was the release cut yesterday?
No, the release wasn't cut yesterday, and this is probably worth discussing. There's been quite a bit of discussion of this on Slack. Pardon me. And this relates to the sort of Spire issue you run into with resource leaking. Basically, we had a bug that was found with that. The Spire folks have been wonderfully cooperative, but they're not going to be able to get a release out with a fix for that until April 6th, which is tomorrow. And so the proposal was made so that we could ship sort of a 1.3 that was good, and using a release Spire to delay the release until April 12th in order to pick up this fix. And in the course of that discussion, there were a variety of sort of concerns brought up, not just with the 1.3 release timing, but with what that meant for the 1.4 release timing. And a whole bunch of conversations happened over Slack. And I think, and please, anyone on the call who has a differing view, please feel free to speak up. But I think that we are to the point where we are okay with the 4.12 release date for 1.3. Is that more or less match everyone else's understanding?
Sorry, Ed, which day did you mention?
For 1.3, the release date of April 12th?
Yes, confirmed by us. That is okay with us.
Okay, good. That was my understanding, but sometimes I misunderstand things. So I always want to give people an opportunity to speak up. Cool. Anything else? Mm-hmm. Yes.
I was going to ask, we have the NSM 1.4 released on the schedule is to be discussed as well. Is that something we want to talk about now, or is that something that we should talk about when we actually cut the release in case there was another urgent need to slip it?
I think we should probably discuss that now, and in part because I think there was some sensitivity about the timing for the NSM 1.4 release. And so I wanted to make sure that we got that at least, in place, et cetera, because I think that we have some folks, they're part of the reason that people are a little bit calmer about the 1.3 release being slipped is because we could have some flexibility on 1.4. My understanding is that there are plans to consume 1.4 by some of our downstream consumers, for which ideally we'd be looking at a release of May 30th. Again, folks should speak up if I've gotten that wrong, which is a little bit tighter in schedule than what we normally do. Normally we run about a 60-day cycle. This would be closer to 6 weeks than 8 weeks in terms of the cycle. So I wanted to sort of bring that up for discussion and see how folks felt about that.
So just as a heads up, it is right after KubeCon, about a week and a bit. So one of the questions that I have is in terms of people who are working, who are, if there's anyone who's attending KubeCon who that is participating, that is going to be impacted by this as well. So I think we should make sure we take that into account.
That's absolutely true, because as a general rule, my presumption is that absolutely nothing useful that isn't social gets done at KubeCon. Right? It's all social all the week. So I do know that we have some folks who are presenting at KubeCon EU, and we may have some folks who are also attending. Do we know if we have the right set of folks who are not attending, who could handle things like the release candidates and the feature freeze and the testing and whatnot?
I think this is a primary question for people at Ericsson, because we know for sure that you have some people who are presenting there. So just want to make sure that that you have enough time to check things out, or test or develop against, or so on, against the work that's coming up.
So let me sort of put it this way. If we were to pencil in May 30th, if that's something that folks could go back and check on and let us know if there are going to be any issues there. Is that something you could do, Johan or Lionel? I think we've got, do we still have Zhixiang on the call? Zhixiang on the call?
Yes, I am on the call. I think it should not have much impact on the release date. I mean, at least from our point of view, it should not have impact. And also for our adoption of the new release, NSM 1.4 release, that should be fine.
Okay, that's good.
And yeah, one thing that I mentioned with you via Slack, that we have released in June. So that's why I'd like to be able to adopt, to include NSM 1.4 in our release, we need some room to be able to uplift and do the testing. So that's why May 30 would be good for us. If later, then we might not be able to include that in our release.
Yeah, and we certainly want to make that possible, and that's sort of why I brought this up. And so if we were to walk that back, that would be looking at basically the 23rd for release candidate and the 16th for feature freeze, presuming I got the dates right, which appears to. So we're running a bit tighter for 1.4. And then the other thing I did want to raise, because this is something else that we had discussed over Slack, is what would need to happen to consider more frequent releases post v1.4. Because I know as a general rule, and this is a personal preference on my part, I generally prefer faster releases to slower releases. And I think you had mentioned, Zhang, that you also preferred faster releases in terms of the cadence of releases. But in order to be able to accommodate that, if you were to sort of hypothetically go to releases every 30 days, we can't be spending 2 weeks on feature freeze and release candidates. If we're cycling that quickly, it just becomes too much overhead. So we'd have to figure out the kinds of things that would need to happen for that. We don't necessarily have to figure that out in this call, but it's probably a good thing for folks to sort of think about. certainly any ideas folks have right now, we could absolutely raise, but I wanted to sort of put that idea in folks' heads and see what things people had in mind and what sort of, what things we would have to overcome to get to a faster turn of releases.
I have a question, how the current CI in NSM works. I mean, like, do we have any description, right, documentation about that? Then maybe we can take it from there. I mean, like, jointly, we can take it from there to see how we can improve. Because I think that we'll be able to have more frequent release. I think CI/CD is a key here.
I would agree. I mean, effectively, the way we end up with, we should find out why we have red arrows here right now. After this call, Denise, probably. The way the network service mesh CI generally works is that when a PR is merged into a repo, there are downstream repos that it gets populated to. Their CI runs. If you do in fact get a CI failure, right? So for example, here we have one where an update from SDK SRIOV has failed to build. And I think someone is taking a look at that currently. If there's a failure there, then we stop propagating at that point. But eventually you get down to things like deployment K8s, which has all the examples that we test, integration K8s that compiles them all to Go, integration K8s kind, which runs all of them in kind, and then they end up being run across the various clusters and then in integration domains K8s, but we only pass the change on and merge it to the next repo down the line if in fact it works. So I guess from a CI point of view, there's sort of two things that are sort of interesting there. One of them is what other kinds of CI/CD, like long running tests, would we want to put into this structurally? Or upgrade tests or those sorts of things. And then the other thing we would want to think about is how do we make it, I think you had mentioned, Jiang, that you were having some, you could pick up a release, but you were having difficulty picking up something between releases and feeding it into your pipeline. And so it would be good to understand what some of the complications are there so we can try and figure out ways to make that easier. Because I think the ideal world would be every time something gets to the end and passes integration interdomain K8s, meaning that it's a good change, that we loop back and that's something that can feed downstream into whatever your pipeline is.
Yeah, I think we don't have everyone needed to have the input in this call. I mean, from my teams in this call. So we need to get back on that.
That's fine. That's fine. It's not, neither of these are problems we have to solve today. I just wanted to start raising them today. Okay. Anything else on those subjects before we move on?
Just I have a question for the release. I think it's your NSM bot who's creating the release in every repo. And I was wondering if it was possible to use this GitHub feature to generate release notes on every repo.
And, that's interesting.
This feature is taking the pull request messages and putting everything in the release description. So it might make it easier for us to find what are the changes in each project.
That is interesting. I think we would probably want to filter out the upstreams from NSM bot from those release notes.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, that would definitely be something worth looking into. I don't know. I don't know that's something we can do for 1.3, but it's definitely something interesting to look at doing going forward.
We also can probably use template for example, to get diff between two versions. For example, from previous version and current version, we can just show a diff.
That wouldn't quite give you release notes. I mean, it would give you some idea of what the code changes are, but it doesn't give you the semantics about why they changed or what was going on with them.
Yeah, the feature GitHub provides is referring to the pull request message, and it refers to the pull request itself.
Is there a specific GitHub action that you have in mind when you mention this?
As you know, GitHub already has a feature that allow to generate automatically release notes based on changes.
Okay.
Yes, we can look at example into deployments, Kubernetes latest release. It just collects all merged PRs with names and PR links. Probably it could be enough.
Again, the trick is we'd want to filter out the NSM bot stuff probably.
Oh,
Because,
yeah.
because NSM bot is kind of chatty.
Yes, it's our best contributor.
Yes. No, but that's a very good idea. I like that idea a lot. Okay. So anything else on these matters?
I think we should move on to the next.
Excellent. So if I recall, this is something that had come up, and I think it looks like it's been fixed. Did we confirm that this has been fixed last week? In terms of, okay, so this fix looks like it's still open in terms of suppressing the chatty logs. So the fix hasn't quite gone in yet. So we'll
Okay,
check
so-
back next. So hopefully it will go in. Because my recollection was this is one where nothing was actually broken, but the logs were making people think things were broken, and that's not good.
Yeah, it looks like it's pretty close. So.
Yep. I think we had talked about the Spire resource issue as part of delaying 1.3 to the 12th. Anything else that we need to talk about with that?
We should probably come up with some agreement where if for some reason Spire happened to be delayed, then what course of action do we want to take?
It's a good point. We should probably also let the Spire folks know that we're waiting on their release tomorrow. That helps as well.
Yeah, I think it's extremely low risk, but considering there's no meeting between now and then.
So so I understand things. If they don't get their release out, I don't see a lot of options for us other than cutting a custom Spire release that contains the fix. Does that match everyone else's sense of things?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and I'll let them know as well that we're depending on it, and if there's any issues to raise it with us, and then we can bring it up in the Slack channel if there turns out that there's an issue, and we'll make sure to ping the relevant people who have voiced that that this is something that's urgent for them. So we also have the workload registrar container restarting while the Spire server socket is not ready. Definitely less severe. I assume this it definitely causes some, like over time it just sort of heals.
You're breaking up pretty badly on my end, Frederick. I don't know if anyone else is having the same issue.
Yeah, so I can't hear the same.
Okay. So, I mean, this issue, if I recall, when we discussed it in the past, it's not critical. It's obviously something that should be fixed, but I think we decided that we could, postpone adopting a fix until 1.4. If we needed
Yes,
to.
I've already received and tested the quick fix. So, but it will not be released in the next Spire release, but the after one, I think.
Okay. I mean, I think where we left it was if they don't get it fixed, we can move on without the fix. And but obviously it would be good if it landed, but otherwise we'll pick it up in 1.4.
Yeah, we have a workaround for it.
Got it. Okay. Awesome. And then I think likewise there were some things, Lionel, you felt we should continue working on the IP policy removal, but that could wait till 1.4.
Yeah, for now, the current IPN policy update is good enough. And yeah, for the next one, the IP rules, we can have it in 1.4. It's fine. Thanks.
Got it. And then Laszlo, I seem to recall you've pushed a fix for this, but it's probably something we should do for 1.4, where we would only have one command forwarder OVS image. Is that correct? You're very, very faint, Laszlo. I can't hear you.
Okay. Hello.
You're a little bit louder, but you're still very faint.
So, hello.
Now I can hear you.
I created an issue for this. And I'm progressing with this, but a little bit slow.
Okay.
Yeah, it's doable.
Yeah. I mean, always keep in mind with something like this, the law of unnatural acts. If you find yourself doing something that's just terribly convoluted and unnatural, then we should probably talk about it, because while it would be really, really good to have this be only a single image, not at the cost of doing something really awful. But my hope is that this is a fairly straightforward thing to, that it can be made fairly straightforward is my hope. But keep an eye on it. And then lastly, I think you also were looking at, we have a fairly old PR that didn't go in from Perry to run the OVS kernel mechanism test. Are we not currently running the OVS examples in CI?
Regarding this, I have a question mainly about the CI. If you have any suggestion how to debug, for example, if I have a draft PR in deployments K8 and the integration test is generated by another repo, and the third one runs the CI workflow, and the
Okay. So my understanding, you're still a little bit muddled, but my understanding is you're looking for advice on how to do reproduction of the CI stuff so that you can try and figure out what's broken about it. And I think that comes down to two things, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong. One is sort of like getting advice from folks who are doing this, and we could probably get some of that advice most easily on Slack, about the mechanics of how do you go from deployment K8 to generated integration tests to running them in an environment like Packet. But it strikes me probably the second thing that would be helpful for you would be being able to access some servers and packets to go and be able to run this manually outside of just pushing patches to the CI. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so
So,
do you need SRIOV for this?
that's a good question. Hopefully not.
Okay. And do you, I recall you may need Mellanox NICs for this, is that correct?
Pardon me, I didn't hear.
You may need Mellanox NICs for this?
No. As I,
Okay.
It's not needed for the.
Okay. So I
basic,
will,
OVS examples, but I have to double check.
okay, so let's do this. Let's start let's start a conversation on the NSM dev channel for folks to offer their advice for how to manually do some of the CI stuff, moving from deployment K8s to integration tests and so forth, because there's a fair bit of experience that can be shared there. And then I will hit you up privately over Slack to get an email address from you to get you access to the NSM packet project, so that you can go and create some servers there in order to try things out. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, thanks.
Awesome. I appreciate you bringing it up.
So hopefully my connection is working. Can you hear me now?
I hear you now.
Okay. So I think that was the end of the agenda. Is there anything else that people would like to bring up? Not hearing anything. So with that, I want to thank you all for your time, and we will see you all again at the same time next week. Take care.
Thank you.
Take care.